So hi Abhishek, thanks for joining us today. And as we are here to discover more about Dalgo, what it does, and how you've been an integral part of Dalgo from the very inception to where it is now and where it's headed probably in the future. To start with, if you can just shed some light on how Dalgo and your journey with Dalgo started, and where it is at this point in the stage of the product.
Right. So Dalgo is a data platform that helps nonprofits automate the flow of data so that they can easily generate insights, spend more time learning from their data and less time managing their data, right? As to why Dalgo and how the idea came about overall, it's because through our fractional CXO program, we do interact with a lot of NGOs through and through across the company, across the nonprofit, how they work and manage their data flows, and even beyond that to tech and data strategy. And an observation was made by by Vinod on the fractional CXO team on the fact that NGOs have a tough time consolidating their data. They use multiple tools to collect data. So they could be running baseline, midline, endline surveys with a survey tool, and that data is siloed in the survey tool. They'll be running data entry on some Google Sheets or Excel sheets. They may be even be using a chatbot, and so that data is in a separate place. All of these things are for slightly different purposes, but in the end, towards the larger or overall aim of the nonprofit, right? And so the idea is that the nonprofit should be able to paint a holistic picture of their impact to share externally, and should be able to observe that holistic picture internally to inform their program practice, right? So if you're using different tools across different locations, you want to come together and see how is everything going across all my locations. If you're using it for different functions, like I was saying, baseline, midline, endline versus chatbot engagement versus running operational data, you want to see all of that come together. So nonprofits will string this together in a week way or spend a lot of time every quarter trying to bring this data together. And the idea is, can you make this easy for them and help them spend more time actually looking at the information, generating insights, learning how they can improve their programs.
Great. And so you also understand that how social sector perceives data. I mean, they spend a lot of time doing it, but then the time when the reporting comes, they don't want to reflect and put everything on paper. A, because they can't understand most of it. B, because a lot of data is not being collected holistically. So the reports are just whatever they want to showcase is what comes out. And then the funders and donors just want a rosy picture of the data that's been put out in front of them. So that's where their idea of data and the data visualization comes in. But from whatever insights that Vinod came up with around data, and then how that gap is still there. So again, if you can just collect a bit of insights from your experience working with NGOs of how Dalgo has really bridged that gap. Has it been able to do that?
So I would reframe and say two things, right, which you can say as generalizations about the nonprofit ecosystem as far as data and learning goes. I would say yes, net across the spectrum, if one thing all nonprofits will have in common is they use data for reporting.
True.
Right? That everyone has to do. It's a requirement, right? Because it's all grant based. I would say nonprofits vary in terms of how they use data. Some nonprofits are data forward and have the data and tech muscle, right? But again, that's why Tech for Dev exists. It's because tech or the tech arm and the tech ecosystem is not strong or catering to nonprofits. So the teams for tech and data are typically under-resourced, right? But not always, right? So then these being the broad landscape of what we understand of tech and data as far as nonprofits go, within that, there are nonprofits like a SNEHA, right? Who are collecting data rigorously, right? Their field team is invested. They have a monitoring and evaluation team, and they adopted Dalgo to level up on that, right? Because since rigorous data collection is happening, there's a clear visibility of what we want as outcomes, right? But it's just to have that more, like I was saying, a holistic picture. then SNEHA adopted Dalgo, upskilled also, and resource themselves by hiring a data engineer as well, and then used Dalgo to create um, a data pipeline for data coming in from various sources, so a survey data collection tool, as well as some sheets of theirs, and they brought that together, and they were able to create dashboards for every level of their organization. In doing this, they made data accessible to the field workers on a regular basis, right? Which is to say, every day now the data is refreshed. So today I can look, this morning before I go out on the field, I can look at the data and see this is the place I need to go to, this is the place where I need to create outcomes, right? So the field workers now had regular access to data, right? Okay. Daily access to data, as did then the field coordinator, the M&E team. And while they started, they adopted Dalgo first for one program. SNEHA runs multiple programs. Now they've adopted it for, I think, 3, right? And they're going on to expand that. And also thinking of now across the breadth of the work that they do, how can they have an overall view, right? Okay. And SNEHA has done this quite methodically, step by step, since they're a large organization and they do deep work. So that's happened. And the key changes they've seen is where the M&E team used to spend so much time before on, consolidating the data. They were only able to give monthly access. Now it's daily access. Okay. Where it was before restricted to the M&E team and leadership. Now every level of the organization has access to data, is able to use it to make decisions.
Like right now, you just also suggested on the abstract spectrum of where the NGOs are, where some just do not even understand what data is required for, and the other spectrum just being very data forward, creating dashboard, creating flows, using Dalgo and likes of those. What would you say specifically Dalgo is? Again, so Dalgo being this data platform to kind of visualize data, segregate and integrate data into whatever flows that they're creating. Still is very complex of a jargon, if I may say, for a social sector space. So how's Dalgo kind of working towards simplifying that, A, for NGOs, and B, kind of, taking it to the masses where you're saying that the field workers are using it. So how is kind of Dalgo kind of, I would say simplifying it and making sure that the adoption increases, because this is very much required in the social space.
Right.
So yeah, if your thoughts on that.
Right. So as I would describe it now, Dalgo helps you automate your data pipelines, and in doing so makes it a lot easier for you to focus on that piece of, which is the most popular piece, visualizing data, analyzing data. You have the ready information, right? All brought together clean. And that's where Dalgo is now. As we move forward with the advent of AI, right? AI is making it so much easier to even now analyze qualitative data, which is something nonprofits do rely heavily on, right? Like if I go on field and I speak to someone, I can ask them about their, if it's a health program, how many visits they've made to a medical center, height, weight, all of those demographic cuts. And I'll also ask them what their experience is, right? And they'll give me qualitative information. And generally what nonprofits are doing is they're reading that line by line and trying to summarize and then draw inference and improve their programs. AI now makes it possible, if that's just something you're noting and there are multiple rows of that data, you can summarize, understand trends about your stakeholder or about your intervention if they're giving you feedback on your intervention. So that's on AI, right? And AI also makes it much easier to deal with quantitative data, as some people might have seen if they played around with ChatGPT and other
Everyone
tools,
has.
right? Exactly. And second is, from our lens overall, I mean, the idea is to make data use easy for as many nonprofits as possible, right? So maybe some nonprofits don't have extensive needs, but they do use data and they do want to be able to use data better. So looking forward, Dalgo's thinking about how we can serve more and more of these nonprofits, right? So you don't need a complex pipeline, but you do have some data and you do want to be able to bring it together. And so as Dalgo's evolving in that direction, that's kind of what we've been discussing here over the past few days, and kind of we're hoping to make that a reality sooner rather than later. And again, AI is going to help us do that, automate a lot of that much more easily. So
wonderful. And like it also touched upon the AI part of it. So since a lot of people are adopting AI because it's simple, the user interface is very intuitive in the manner that you just put qualitative data and it gives you trends, insights that you would have missed out otherwise because it's just processing it at that rate and that scale. Uh, that brings me to the other question where, Dalgo, again, as a standalone platform is there. But if you can also shed some light on the API integrations or how it interacts with the other, platforms if an organization already has in place to build on top of it, or kind of streamline those as a structure.
So this gets into a bit of the specifics, but broadly what Dalgo is doing is, like I said, you could be using multiple tools for data collection, right? So Dalgo enables you to connect to over 300 sources of data off the bat. And since Dalgo is built, it's an open source tool built on open source tools. What we're able to do is, if there's a source of data that you're using that Dalgo can't currently cater to, we're able to develop a connector to that source and then pull that data. And then once we do that, other NGOs can use that connector. We don't need to, it becomes accessible to everyone. So that's as far as the ingestion integration goes, right? Meaning we can pull data from essentially any source, right? And then as far as visualization goes, Dalgo offers a visualization tool called Superset, which is open source, but Dalgo is also designed in another way. In a way such that Dalgo is also designed in a way such that if you're already using a visualization tool, you can continue using that, right? So whatever data Dalgo processes and creates, you could connect it to any visualization tool that you have and visualize the data and use it for your dashboarding. So.
Great. And that just kind of brings me now to the last part of the interaction, where if you can also touch upon where and what is next for Dalgo. And like we already talked about, say data visualization and tools like Google Data Studio is available and others that are there. So where does Dalgo want to position itself going forward, and what all is in store for the users who are already using Dalgo, or someone who's probably not using Dalgo but should be using, how they can kind of get in touch? What should they be looking at as a baseline work to begin with before adopting?
So I think those are two separate things, right? Baseline work to look at before adopting. I think you just need to ask yourself the question, am I using data as effectively as I want to now? Assuming you're collecting a significant amount of data. If you're not collecting data, then of course a data platform does not make sense to you. So if you are an organization that's collecting data, you need to ask yourself the question, am I using it as effectively as I want to? Is it a priority for me to be able to use it more effectively? If the answer to that question is yes, then you should look into Dalgo, right? That's I think a primary prerequisite. It should be a priority for you, right? And as far as the future of Dalgo goes, so we've been chatting about a few things. The first thing is, of course, with the advent of AI, can we make it easy for you to do something as simple as what we're now calling chat with your data? Since Dalgo Dalgo enables you to have all your data in one place. Can you just speak to it and get the insights that you want to get, right? So that's one direction we're excited to kind of explore. We've been experimenting with it over the past 6 months or so. And another thing we're looking at is what we're describing as storytelling with your data. We're looking at this in two ways. The first way is, if you're a nonprofit, you're using Dalgo, you've brought all your data together using Dalgo, can you automatically generate reports, right? Because everyone needs to report on, like we discussed, on a quarterly basis, or if not more or less frequent. And so can you go direct to report, right? Secondly, can you use dashboards more effectively, right? For sometimes dashboards are created and adoption is low and they die a silent death, right? So can we make dashboards more useful as not a tool we refer to occasionally, but as an integral part of conversations, right? So that's another thing we're excited to begin to look into for the platform. Right now, what the platform does is it caters to you at a cost that nonprofits can afford. It caters to nonprofits in terms of it not having any limitations on how much data, how many users, things like that. We're also thinking of how can we make it more sector specific. So when I speak of report generation, if you're a health organization, can you automate reports for all organizations that are in health who come to Dalgo, right?
Okay.
Or if you're an education organization, can you give someone an immediately relevant report for education, right, in terms of learning outcomes, etc. So that's something we're thinking of. And I think the last thing that we've been speaking about is just user education. Not even user education, but beginning the conversation around data,
Yeah.
right? So having more of that with the nonprofit sector so that we can learn from them. We don't come we don't come from a place where we at all have any misconception that we know everything. The people who know what they need are the nonprofits.
Yeah.
And so can we start that conversation, start having conversations around data with nonprofits, and in doing so, cross share the potential for data as data objectively, and then within the sector, and then feed that back into the product so that we can serve nonprofits better. So I think that's
Perfect. Thanks so much, Abhishek. And that covers a lot about Dalgo and also demystifies data and usage of the platform for a lot of the people who might be seeing this at a later stage. And hopefully it also shares an insight on how data and its integration into the flows that already exist. Or if you're hesitant, then how and what do you need to do to kind of make it easier for yourself. So yeah, thanks again for joining us.